Chapter 16. Nikolai knew Satan was angry with him for his faithfulness under persecution and his desire to keep the Sabbath. He was angry with Nikolai for all he had done as a pastor to spread the gospel. The evil one was frustrated with the way the church had been growing under Nikolai's leadership in Kiev and the surrounding towns of the Ukraine. Could anyone be surprised that Satan would do everything in his power to stop the work? It was Satan who had incited the KGB to persecute Nikolai when he lived in Kiev. Satan had sent Nikolai to the Siberian tundra as a prisoner to be isolated for a very long time, the rest of his life maybe. And now he was making life even harder for Nikolai by imprisoning him in a small box where there wasn't even room enough for him to stretch his legs. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered just now. Nikolai would serve his time in the box for the sake of the gospel. How many more times he was going to have to do this was anybody's guess. He hoped this would be his last, but Nikolai knew he was only fooling himself if he really believed that. The warden was angry and offended that nothing he did or said had worked to change Nikolai's mind and make him obey orders. He despised Nikolai's stubbornness, and Nikolai was going to have to pay the price for it. However, if Nikolai was going to be stubborn about something, he wanted to be stubborn for the gospel of Jesus. He determined in his mind that he would outlast the best and the worst of what the warden could give him, and he would do it gladly. As morning turned into afternoon and afternoon into early evening, Nikolai again consoled himself by praying and quoting scripture. As the darkness of night descended upon the stable, Nikolai could feel the stiffness slowly but surely returning to his joints. He tried to keep his knees moving. He also decided to sing to lift his spirits. He didn't have much of a singing voice, but the words to a familiar hymn came to mind. Under his wings I am safely abiding, though the night deepens and tempests are wild. The words were unsteady at first, but then Nikolai's voice grew stronger. Still I can trust him. I know he will keep me. He has redeemed me, and I am his child. Nikolai's voice swelled even fuller on the chorus line. Under his wings, who from his love can sever? Under his wings my soul shall abide, safely abide forever. The words worked like tonic, and Nikolai realized that they were the magic he needed to keep his spirits up. In fact, all through that first night, he awoke to try and bend his stiffening knees. He would hum a few lines of the hymn, under his wings, and then he would doze off into a surprisingly restful sleep. Of course, when he awakened the next morning, it took him some time before he could get the circulation going in his legs again. All that day and the following night he remembered his promise to himself and to God. Over and over again he reminded himself that he was determined to be true to his beliefs. He would endure the discomfort of persecution for Jesus' sake, no matter what the price. He would manage the pain by praying and quoting Bible promises and singing hymns whenever he needed a spiritual boost. The pain grew unbearable after only 2 days, but Nikolai's courage remained strong. He spent his time recounting the blessings God had given him and the good memories he had of his family and church back home. The routine was the same. In the morning, Nikolai would watch through the cracks of the box as Oleg came to take Maxim to work for the day. At night, he would watch them return, tired after their many trips to the spring. A kilometer away, Nikolai grew accustomed to the sound of the ox munching the sedge grass and his even breathing when he slept. It was a comfort to have another living creature near him, one that perhaps understood what it was like to be a prisoner against his will. One thing was different this time around. Yuri made it a habit to bring Nikolai a can of water and a chunk of Russian black bread once a day. That was it, but it was better than nothing, and Nikolai was pretty sure that the bread was being brought in secret. He had detected a note of sympathy on Yuri's part, but he was sure the guard would never admit it. If the warden shared any of Yuri's sentiments, he hid them well. Whatever scars there were that made the warden who he was ran deep, and Nikolai felt badly for the man. About noon on the 10th day, the lid to the box opened again, and the fresh air and light was a shock to him. And again, it was the face of the guard he saw first. Yuri held a handkerchief over his nose and mouth as he shook his head disgustedly. "I don't understand you, preacher man," he said in a muffled tone, "and I probably never will." Again Yuri left Nikolai lying on the floor of the stable. Again Nikolai half crawled, half clawed his way to a pile of straw in the corner. The painful relief of being able to stretch out his legs was excruciating, but Nikolai understood the pain this time around. He was getting used to the feeling of the box. He was ahead of the game this time. Near dark, Oleg returned to the stable with Maxim. When he had unhitched old Maxim, the ox came into the stable on his own accord. After all, it was his home. He paused as he walked past Nikolai and sniffed the smelly creature lying in the bed of straw. Nikolai watched the ox eat his supper and then lie down in the soft straw beside him. Several times Nikolai thought he might attempt to crawl back to the barracks, but every time he tried to get to his knees, he was slumped back onto the straw in pain. He was just too weak to even make it to the stable door, let alone all the way to the barracks. But it didn't matter to Nikolai. He had nothing to lose one way or the other. In fact, sleeping next to Maxim's warm body was an advantage during the cooler nights. Nikolai dozed into a sleep of total exhaustion. He once again feebly hummed the familiar words, "Safely abide forever."